Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Things to Know When Creating a CBD Beverage. This event, brought to you by Prepared Foods, is sponsored by SORSE Technology. I'm your moderator, Doug Peckinpah, Group Editorial Director at BNP Media. Thanks for joining us. Today's presenter is Michelle Sundquist, Director of Product Development at SORSE Technology. Michelle is a 20-plus year Starbucks partner, and she comes with an extensive background in the food and beverage industry. She was responsible for designing innovative new beverages and the commercialization of the supporting ingredients and tools. Michelle joined Starbucks after supporting the Seattle's Best Coffee team, a division of Starbucks. Her roles there included developing an entire new platform of specialized hot and blended beverages for a new concept drive-through and a line of beverages that launched through the U.S. exclusively at state fairs. Throughout the presentation, don't forget to submit your questions, and later in the program, our presenter will address as many as possible. Today's event is being recorded and archived on preparedfoods.com/webinars. Now I'm excited to turn things over to today's presenter, Michelle Sundquist. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. Happy Thursday, everyone. Excited to have you here. I hope what I'm sharing today can help you on your journey to creating successful CBD beverages. I'm going to start with a little bit of background on myself. I'm Michelle Sundquist, the Director of Product Development at SORSE Technology. As you heard, I have a lot of experience in beverages. I have about 23 years in the beverage industry. I actually started by working in espresso at a coffee shop at Crystal Mountain. Through there, while I was in college, I started working at Seattle's Best Coffee. We were acquired by Starbucks at some point. The company was really small. While I was there, I wore multiple hats. I was a franchise consultant for a while. I worked in implementation, I worked in training, and I worked with the product development team a lot. So through that process, I really enjoyed working with that team and wanted to learn more about product development. So I wanted to learn about what makes a product successful, what makes a beverage successful. So I spent a lot of time just researching how do you take a beverage and make a beverage successful? What are those pieces? So a little bit about SORSE Technology. SORSE Technology is a CBD emulsion supplier. We take CBD, which is a thick, oily material, smells, tastes like cannabis. Our technology allows you to easily add CBD to water without separating and without any cannabis flavor aroma. So your customer can enjoy your beverage just the way that you want it. Our team consists of approximately 50 people. We have collectively about 150 years of experience in new product development. We have 30 employees that are dedicated to research and development, quality assurance, operation. And through our team and all of our experience, we offer support in helping customers through the development and manufacturing process. So we're going to have some polls for you to fill out so we can get an idea of who is in the audience and who we're talking to. So if you could just take a few minutes to fill this out. This is what part of the industry do you work in? So this will help me cater my presentation to you. Are you a product development for finished goods? Are you an ingredient supplier? Flavor house? We have manufacturing and packaging here. And then we have regulatory data and testing or other. Theoretically, other is anything that doesn't fit into those categories. So right now it looks like we have about 33%, 35%, kind of growing in product development for finished goods, which is good. We have some ingredient suppliers on here. Manufacturing and packaging. Looks like we've stabilized. So I'm going to move to our next slide. So now you can see what I see. So we have about 38%, 57 people from product development for finished goods, about 17% of ingredient suppliers, and about 16% in manufacturing and packaging. So that's awesome. And then we have another poll we're just going to move through. And this one is, what stage are you in the product development process? So we have exploratory stage, like, are you thinking about it? You are looking in the grocery store shelves and you're like, wow, there's a lot of CBD products out here. I think I want to make one. Perhaps you've already decided that you're going to make a CBD product and you're working on product formulation. So you have your formulation, you have your product, but you don't necessarily know how to get CBD into it. Maybe you've already got into the point of starting to evaluate CBD solutions and suppliers. Maybe you're at the point of production and manufacturing. You need to learn a little bit more about things that you need to look for. Perhaps your product is already in the market. So we're going to move to the next slide. It looks like most of the people on here are kind of in this exploratory stage, which is good. CBD is a really strong trend, so there should be a lot of people there. Product formulation, about 22%. So that's good. Pretty much what my presentation is catering to. So we're also going to talk a lot about evaluating CBD solutions and suppliers, things to look for. All right, so we're going to move into our overview. So during this webinar, you're going to learn 5 areas to focus on when developing a new CBD beverage. So we'll go into detail on how to select your audience. We'll go into detail on determining your delivery method and packaging solutions, creating a flavor profile and determining dosaging, identifying and selecting a CBD supplier, and then identifying product solutions. Again, you can download this presentation after the presentation, so you can review it later as well. Okay, so marketplace overview. Before you start, you want to know your market. So we know cannabis and CBD sales, they're everywhere. You go into the store, you sit in the gas station, there's CBD products all over the place. CBD sales rose by about 24% in 2019. Now we're moving into 2020. There's a lot going on in 2020, right? Everyone's talking about what's happening in 2020. There's lots of memories out there. So we know that people are we're seeing a rise in holistic health. People are really focusing on how they can enhance their lives and make them healthier. So previously, maybe we were doing gyms and spas. Now we're incorporating wellness into every part of our life. So we're trying to improve our sleep. We have mental health. We have energy levels. We're trying to incorporate vitamins and other supplements into our daily routine. The nice thing about beverages are easily incorporated into consumers' daily routine. CBD already has a strong presence. It's quickly becoming mainstream. So you don't have to worry about the hurdle of whether CBD is acceptable or not, because there's already CBD products out in the market. So big question, are all CBD products created equal? All CBD products are not created equal. You can easily add CBD to a product, but are you able to get the product out of the product or out of your packaging and into your body? So that's something you have to consider as you're creating your formula. It's easy to make a product, but will that product be a quality product? That's the hard part. So for SORSE technology, we follow really strict established FDA guidelines for food processing. This is not a requirement for THC and CBD processors. So we very specifically treat all of our products as if they are food products and if they are food ingredients. So we're following all of those. Not everybody is doing that. So before you buy a CBD product, you do want to do a little bit of research into the company that's making the product. For SORSE Tech specifically, in order to vet a CBD supplier, we make an emulsion. We're taking CBD from various suppliers and putting it into our emulsion. We don't work with every supplier out there. We vet our suppliers. We've probably vetted over 60 suppliers. We found about 5 suppliers that have the specifications that we need. So we require our suppliers to supply us with documentation. And this is also what you should be asking your suppliers for. You want documentation that they are doing everything they can to remove any sort of contamination from their CBD product. So make sure that there's no chemical contamination, no physical contamination, and no microbiological contamination. So with any CBD ingredient, you want to get a certificate of analysis, so you know exactly what you're getting. And they should be able to supply you with that. Okay, so we have building a beverage. So building a beverage starts long before you're in a lab or a kitchen, and a lot of us are kind of in this exploratory space. So we have to kind of ask ourselves, like, how is our product going to be different? What's going to differentiate you and your product from all the rest of the products out there? Why is your customer going to be compelled to buy your product? What will make them come back? So you have a lot of creativity that needs to go into it. There's also some analysis that you have to do in order to figure out if this is a good idea or not. So what regulations do you need to follow? If this is a CBD beverage and if it's going into the US, we have our FDA rules. If this is going overseas into another country, they have their regulations that you need to look into. So there's a little research that needs to be done before you can put your product out there. And then where does your idea fit with beverage trends? Are the flavors that you picked out, are these popular flavors that people are putting in the market right now? So what risks are out there? As you're analyzing your product to determine if this is the right idea, are there any risks that are associated with it? And if so, do a little bit of analysis on that. If there's a large range in risk and cost, ask why. Get into the details. If there seems to be less risk in a product that's less expensive, that might be a red flag. So then you have problem solving. Has this something been done before? Is there someone out there that can help you? find strategic partners that are subject matter experts in those areas that can help you, guide you through the process. Flexibility. Things may evolve as you research them. There's a lot of ideas are informed by a lot of things. You have your market, you have nutrition, you have health, you have customer insights. You also have like technology advancements. So is there new ingredients? Perhaps there's new natural options that you want to explore. Are there scientific advancements? Is there something that can help make your product stronger or extend the shelf life? Are there changes in the external environment? I would say that right now for 2020, there's a lot of changes in our environment, and those are affecting trends. So it's good to constantly double check your idea, make sure that it's still the right idea. And then at the same time, your market knowledge is going to change, your customer needs are going to change. So it's good to do a lot of research into that area to really get to know your customer and understand everything that surrounds them that could potentially change your product and what you would need to fill that void. So collaboration. Work closely with your ingredient suppliers and your processors and manufacturers. Do research with your customers. So the collaboration part, the more input you can get, the easier it's going to be for you to be able to hit your consumer target. So challenges of cannabinoids. We have definitely sensory. You can either find a product that has very little flavor and very little sensory. You also have consumers that sometimes prefer to have a little bit of a cannabis flavor to their product. So you really need to understand what your customer wants and what the product is you're working with and how you can kind of get those to connect together. You also have dosage control. So we're working with an active ingredient. You have your raw ingredient and your certificate of analysis that tells you how much CBD is in that. Then how do you get that into your product and also maintain a very tight number for your CBD that you're potentially putting on your label and letting your customers know you have. Then you also have reliable and repeatable onset and duration. So is the product that you're getting, is your CBD product, is it consistent? Is it going to be consistent batch to batch? Is the quality of the CBD that's in that product, is it going to have the same effect batch to batch? As you expand your market and you have more customers, you want something that's consistent. So manufacturing can also be a challenge. A lot of places won't allow CBD in their facility. So before you have your heart set on a product, make sure you have a place to manufacture it. This can definitely delay your launch if your manufacturer is not entirely comfortable with CBD. So you also have some labeling. There's a lot of products out there right now that are making structure function claims. That's not allowed on labels for CBD. So you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence before you start making any claims on your products and make sure that it's something that you can do. Oh, it looks like, sorry, we have a question. What are key claims being made using CBD in beverages? I think it really depends on where you go. If you go into a natural food store, like a co-op, you don't typically see as many claims, but a lot of times the claims are paired with other ingredients. So they're kind of using a bit of a halo effect for that. So you potentially might have CBD added to melatonin, and maybe they'll be making a claim that says it can improve your sleep. In that case, that could be true. You also have CBD beverages that are sold in gas stations in the Midwest that claim they can make you fly or improve your memory or give you more energy. And in those cases, that's not necessarily true. I'm not entirely sure what else is in there, but there's a lot of claims that are being made about CBD beverages. The important thing to understand is that you're not allowed to make claims on CBD. So if they're making claims on those beverages, it should be because of the other ingredients that's inside of the container. Okay, so we're creating an image in our mind of our brand's persona. So when you're creating your beverage and you want to figure out who your audience is going to be, and you want to find a way to make it so it's compelling for them to purchase it, you need to figure out what's the void in their life that this product can fill. So you should understand what their economic standing is. How much money do they have? How much disposable income do they have? And what do they typically spend it on? Where do they shop for their clothes? Are they a Target shopper or are they a Banana Republic shopper? Is it based on the occasion? People buy different things based off of how they feel. So you want to understand who this person is and why they make the choices that they make. So when it comes to health and wellness, you want to say, what does this person typically eat? Is this a person when they go somewhere, they order a salad? Is this a person when they order somewhere, they get like a smoothie, or do they get like a diet soda? So there's a lot of different ways that people approach their own personal health, and you want to understand your consumer so that you can picture in your head what the beverage is that would be perfect for them. And then you also want to kind of figure out, like, where are they going to drink this, right? What do they do for fun? Is this something that they're going to take with them when they go boating? Is this something they're going to pick up before they go to work in the morning? How are they going to consume this? And then needs and wants. What do they need? Do they need energy? Are they working multiple jobs and they have a bunch of kids? Do they need something to get them through the day? It's really like understanding your consumer and trying to figure out, what is this beverage that's going to be the solution to some problem that they have? Oh, so there's another slide, and we're going to go into some CBD information. So for those of you that have been evaluating CBD products, what's the hardest problem that you've been trying to solve? And in this case, it could be taste. Sometimes it's stability. Sometimes we have accurate dosing. Sometimes homogeneity. So making sure that the product stays homogeneous within the entire solution. And then overall ingredient integration and production. So it looks like a lot of people are focusing on or are challenged with taste and stability, like some with homogeneity. So we're going to talk about, as we go through these slides, we're going to dive into taste and talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about stability. We'll go into like dosing, how much you should dose, and homogeneity. These are some good areas to go deep into. So you can see what I see. So we have 46% in taste, 30% for stability, even divide between dosing and homogeneity. So pro tip, right? The target dictates the CBD type. So when it comes to choosing your type of CBD, you want to infuse your drink. You have a few options. If you want a beverage that has a clean, very specific flavor profile, you want to use an isolate. If you want your consumer to not really know that it has CBD in it, you want to use an isolate. That's not the last step to getting a clean flavor, but when you're picking between the three options, you'll go with an isolate. If you have a customer that you know prefers cannabis and will appreciate the nuances of botanical flavors, you might want to go with a broad spectrum. This is a world where, as people learn about CBD, they are understanding that there's a synergistic effect between terpenes and CBD. So people that know that, when they taste CBD that has terpenes in it, they appreciate it. You have a lot of options with a full spectrum. You can go a low flavor full spectrum. You can do a really bold flavor full spectrum. So you have a little bit to play with that. So if you are having a hard time getting the right flavor with your beverage, maybe looking at your level of whether it's a low or a high flavor full spectrum. So then we also have a broad spectrum. So our broad spectrum is very much like the full spectrum, except for it has plant matter additional to it. So with this, you're going to get a little bit more of an earthy flavor. You're going to get more of those nuances of the terpenes. You also get the CBD. With that, that would be potentially the strongest flavor that you would have. So within these three options, if you're using, say, a broad spectrum and you're like, you don't like the flavor, you might want to look at potentially doing an isolate. Or you might try and figure out other ways to blend your flavors in order to help complement what you're tasting. So we can go into that as well. There's a slide here, which is a really great slide for you. This breaks down the three different types of CBD. So we have a CBD isolate. I'm going to go right to left on this chart. So CBD isolate, CBD only. No entourage effect. It's a pure form of CBD. It's also the one with the cleanest flavor profile. So we have broad spectrum, terpenes plus CBD. So with this, I like to think of CBD isolate kind of like your vodka. You have a nice clean flavor, you can add it to a lot of things. Move into broad spectrum, we're kind of talking a little bit more like a gin, right? Like there's some floral notes, some nuances. It's a little bit more of like this botanical experience. So with that, you have this relief without THC. So you don't have THC, but your terpenes are going to help kind of enhance like your mood. There's different effects. And then you have your CBD. So you have a strong taste and smell, but you don't have any plant matter and you don't have any THC. So we move over to full spectrum. Full spectrum is something that gets talked about a lot. A lot of times broad spectrum and full spectrum get used interchangeably. So you want to ask when you hear it, ask what their definition is. So we have full spectrum terpenes with CBD and THC. So this is the entourage effect of everything together. This will give you kind of like your most well-rounded experience. The plant matter has essential vitamins in it. So when you're going into a world where you really want to focus on adding kind of a healthy spin and additional like nutrients to your beverage, a full spectrum could be a route, but also understand, right, that comes with some flavor. So this is a really great slide for you. So adding CBD to a beverage that already exists is relatively easy. But if you're starting the process from scratch and creating something new, you want to look at food trends. When you're looking at where your product will fit in the marketplace, it's best to examine other products that your customer might purchase. How are those different from other products? So we have our target audience, and our target audience, we're going into the store and we're looking at what they might buy. As we look at what they might buy, and we're kind of looking at this like parallel world of maybe it's beverages, maybe it's t-shirts at Target. But you want to look and see, what's this consumer buying, right? What are these trends that you see? And how is those products that the consumer buys, how are those changing? Because you can tell how your consumer potentially might be evolving based off of how those products are also evolving. And that will give you an idea of maybe where you can get ahead of the game and incorporate that into your product early. So there is a question on how to choose between an isolate and a broad spectrum CBD. There is a slide where we're going to go a little bit more into detail on that. So I'm going to hold that question until we get to the slide. So for product uniqueness and other key considerations, when you do market research, you want to do a deep dive in all the things that your customer is attracted to, all the while focusing on how your product is going to appeal to them and how it's going to be different. When you market to your consumer, you want to talk about all the positives with your product. You want to build that in early. So you have something to talk about, but you also want to talk about how your product is unique. One of those positives that you have in your product should be something that's also unique, so you have something to talk about. In this, we talk about how the narrower you can make your consumer, the better you know them, the more successful you'll be. Again, like if you can picture that consumer in your head of who's going to buy your beverage, you'll have a bigger chance of them purchasing it. If your target audience is everyone in the world, it's going to be a little bit harder to narrow down exactly what flavor profile that consumer is going to want. There's people that do it. But, let's see, we have delivery and packaging solutions. So this is an important part of the product. With this, we have, when you're looking to see where your product is going to fit into the marketplace, you want to examine the other products that your consumer might choose and look at that packaging and see what that packaging looks like. Packaging and your labeling are the first visual and tactile interaction the customer has with your product. So that's the first level of engagement. That's important. You have to think about, like, is your customer drawn to natural products? Do they buy glass over plastic because they are concerned about their environmental footprint? Do they buy products with fruits and vegetables on the label? What type of stores do they typically shop in? So if you know, and for this example, if you know your customer is drawn to natural products and you know that they like to shop in health food stores, I would say that you should make a conscious decision to have that beverage be in glass and not plastic. Kind of seems like that's your consumer. So decisions like that need to be made with the consumer in mind. So here we go, know your consumer. So you want to visualize what your consumer is doing when they're drinking the beverage. So you have your beverage, you have your consumer, and you want to picture that person drinking it. This will help you create your marketing focus. So you can figure out like what your packaging is. If you're picturing your consumer, you can figure out what your color palette's going to be. When someone sees your product in the store, when your consumer goes into the store and walks down the aisle, if they haven't heard of your product before, you want your packaging to call to them. You want your packaging to say, hey, I'm here for you. And then they should go over and they should pick it up, right? Once you hook them with the look of your product, you want your flavor to be the thing that keeps them there and keeps them coming back. So again, we talked about first impressions are important. Through labeling and packaging, again, they reflect your company's principles, your company's spirit, your company's ethos. You want to make your product different. You should also consider how your customer takes in information and products and how they digest it. Where are the products that they typically buy? Where are they advertised? Are they advertised on social media? Are they advertised in a magazine? Is this product something that's handed out at events, perhaps concerts, or perhaps outside of like sample stations? So you want to think about, where is your consumer going to see your product first? And is that a place that you can maybe market to them? Creating a flavor profile. So consumers want and deserve a pleasant culinary experience. So today with national and, well, I guess prior to a couple months ago, we had a lot of global travel and a lot of national travel. With this, flavor trends travel really fast. People are exposed to more things now than they ever have before. There's more flavors out there. There's more cultures. There's more mix-ups of different types of cuisine. So people are exposed to a lot of things they wouldn't have been exposed to before, which makes it so there's a lot more flavor trends out there and a lot more things to play with. That said, it helps to have a base flavor that's transferable and versatile. So if you want to create something that's like exotic and a little bit farther out there, you want to have a secondary flavor that might be the more exotic flavor, but have your base flavor be something that's considered a little more common and a little more acceptable. So for example, you could have a base flavor that's just a citrus flavor. So lots of citrus flavors out there. You could pair it with a secondary flavor, and your secondary flavor could be something that's considered more exotic. And perhaps it's an exotic type of berry or an exotic type of mint. But what you want to do is you want to create a flavor profile using something that's familiar and then something that has potentially a little bit of a twist to it. So exploring food trends. So there's a lot of trends out there. We see them all the time. Millennial pink was a really big trend and people were all over it, right? It's on your food, it's on your clothes, right? There's probably cars that are millennial pink. So adding CBD beverage formula, adding CBD to a beverage that already exists is relatively easy. But if you're starting the process from scratch and creating something new, you need to look at food trends. These often start at a smaller level, a boutique level. Maybe you see them in culinary restaurants. Maybe it's on a foodie Instagram page. But you see these trends that start to pop up. They're a little bit new. They're a little bit different. They seem kind of fun, right? Eventually, they trickle down and they show up at other places. So they could travel and become part of a color palette. They could show up in clothing. They could be an ice cream flavor. Eventually, they'll travel down to the fast food level. This is a highly accessible level. Micro trends are the ones that are just emerging. Mainstream trends are the ones that appeal to a lot of people. There's a lot of trends. There's also trends that are on their way out. So when you're researching trends, you want to figure out, where does your flavor fall into that trend? And you want to make sure that it's not something that's on its way out. Cannabis flavor considerations. So you have your target consumer, and they may dictate the type of CBD that's used. How does this impact your drink's flavor? We talked about before, it does impact the flavor. It impacts the flavor a lot. You can control this by your purity and your quality of your CBD. So for SORSE technology, our emulsion use, right, we talked about common, well-established food ingredients that are understood by the market. So we try and use things that are out there that people are familiar with. On a safety side, we test for pesticides, for heavy metals, for bacteria growth. You want somebody that's very thoroughly testing their product. You want something that's as pure as possible. You start to get off notes and off colors when you are working with a product that's not pure. You also want someone that, again, we talked about it, can provide a consistent and reliable material. So your isolate, you can go with a company that has the ability to provide the cleanest, purest product, and that will give you a cleaner flavor. When you get to full spectrum and broad spectrum, with these, you're going to get terpenes. Terpenes have a lot of flavor in them. You can have your terpenes be blended and maybe top note your full spectrum or broad spectrum with that in order to change the flavor. You can add other things I prefer to add other things that kind of accompany the flavor. So as you're tasting your full spectrum or your broad spectrum, you might notice that maybe there's a bit of like a citrus note. Maybe there's a bit of a rosemary note. Maybe there's something in there that you could add a flavor to help round it out. And then it's not necessarily an off note, but now it's an interesting blend that's balanced in your beverage. So with that can be difficult. You need someone that has a really good flavor palette, and you need someone that understands maybe what some of those notes are that are missing. But my recommendation is, if you don't want any flavor, go with an isolate. If you want flavor and you want that gin, the botanical, earthy notes, go with a full spectrum or a broad spectrum. And if you don't like the flavors of those because they're off-putting, they're just not as acceptable, go with a low flavor full spectrum. So that's something that has less terpenes in it, will be a little bit milder. And I feel like for consumers that maybe aren't as familiar with the full spectrum or the broad spectrum, that might be the best option for them. Determining dosing. So this is an interesting slide as it's very dynamic. As people are learning about CBD, CBD is becoming more common and it's becoming more acceptable. As it becomes more common and acceptable, people are open to higher dosage. So with that, it's like kind of your responsibility as you're creating your product to say, what kind of experience do I want my customer to have? So for a recovery beverage, so think of like a Gatorade, something you would drink after working out. You could go with 25 milligrams of CBD. If you're going with perhaps something that you want to relax at night with, you want to have a little bit of CBD, maybe a lower amount, 10 or 15 in a herbal tea. So sparkling water, CBD sparkling waters are really popular right now. Those average between 15 to 30 milligrams of CBD. And it really comes down to how often is your consumer going to drink these? How many are they going to drink a day? You probably want them to drink a lot a day. So I would try and figure out what that balance is and what, based off of their lifestyle, like what do they need? What are you aiming for? Identifying and selecting a CBD supplier. When you're making an infused beverage, consumer safety should be your number one concern. So that means that your label claims need to be accurate. Your beverage needs to be shelf stable. You need to test your product quality. And you want your consumer experience to be a positive one. So take the time to find a CBD supplier who has extremely high standards. You want a CBD supplier that is at the top of the market. You want someone that has the ability to grow with your company. You want someone that is going to be around after you launch your product. And you want someone that has the ability to be able to work with you, provide a consistent experience, and provide a consistent product. Oh, and that goes into our next slide. What do you need from a supplier? So again, product quality confirmation. So the company supplying your CBD should be able to follow the following regulatory protocols. They should supply documents that verify product quality. And if they don't, you need to ask them for that. They should offer the appropriate solution for your beverage. So CBD suppliers have multiple CBD products. They might have a water-based product. They might have an oil-based product. They might have a powdered product. You might not know what's the best for your product. So your CBD supplier should be able to make a recommendation of what they think will be the best for your product. And this is the best for the quality and best for the shelf life of your product. They should also offer you some implementation support. So as you're adding the CBD to your product, you're going to be working with a lot of different ingredients. You need each of your ingredient suppliers to be an expert in their product. You need your CBD supplier to be an expert at CBD and all things CBD. So they should be offering you that support, and they should be able to answer the questions that you're asking them. One thing you could say is like, do they test for contamination? If they do test for contamination, can they prove it? How often do they test for it? Can they provide you with that paperwork? It's important to ask those questions and then follow up. Continue to ask those questions. Food grade quality and safety. You want to work with a lab that can independently test your product. And you want to work with someone that is open to communication with your CBD supplier. Your CBD supplier should have a relationship with labs, and they should be able to talk back and forth to each other, and they should be able to talk to you. So If you ask your CBD supplier something and they're like, I don't know, the lab told me this, it's their responsibility to go back and ask the questions that you're asking in order to make sure that your product is safe. If you're working with a company that offers an emulsion, make sure that the emulsion is their priority and not simply something that they're adding on as an offering. Look for an emulsion that's stable in its raw form and in the letdown form. And you want one that's been tested for shelf life. If a company cannot supply documentation like a certificate of analysis, a product data sheet, safety data sheet, find a different supplier. You want someone that can provide you with documentation as to what they're doing and how they're going to maintain the quality of their product. Identifying product solutions. So when you're ready to produce your beverage, look for a co-man that's produced other infused beverages. You want a company that understands CBD as an ingredient and has produced other CBD beverages, so they'll understand how to work with it. Doing test batches is key because you'll be able to tweak your batches, figuring out who your consumer is, and is also going to be tied to where you're going to produce your product. If you want to sell your product to an audience in a very specific state, if there's a manufacturer in that state, it's best to produce it as close as possible to where you're going to be going. If there's a facility producing a product similar to yours and it's considered a turnkey process, you'll be more successful at commercializing it because you're not going to be learning. They won't be learning as much as they go. So we have a question. One of them is, what is scalping? That's a really good question. So with any product that's a food product, you're going to have a constant slow degradation of that product. And that can be multiple ingredients. So you might have colors that fade, you might have flavors that fade, and CBD has a tendency to scalp. And what this means is that it's pulled into the lining of its packaging. And this actually can happen with multiple ingredients. We find this is happening with hops as well. So this is where doing a shelf life study is important. You want to be able to, regardless of what your product is, test those ingredients, that formula inside of that packaging, and find out if your product is stable. So your processing, your packaging, and your ingredients are going to be very tightly connected together. I have a question that says, I am unfamiliar with SORSE's function. Does SORSE produce CBD extract, a product, or a distillate CBD? So SORSE technology creates emulsion. So we take CBD and turn it into a water-based emulsion. We actually don't produce CBD. We buy CBD from suppliers and we vet those suppliers. So we had talked about this earlier. We have probably vetted over 60 suppliers and we have 5 that are able to produce the documentation that we require in order to maintain quality. So we are a emulsion technology company and we provide emulsions that are CBD emulsions, THC emulsions. We have terpene emulsions, and there's some other emulsions that we're working on right now. I hope that answers that question. Oh, can you explain more why broad spectrum CBD is stronger flavor than full spectrum? So broad spectrum and full spectrum, and I'm just going to go back to, hold on a second. I'm going to go back to our little chart slide so we can all look at it. Okay, so broad spectrum, full spectrum. So it's not really black and white. I wouldn't say that it always has more flavor. There's different components that make it, and those components can carry a lot of flavor. So we have our CBD. CBD has a flavor. In the CBD isolate, you're going to get the CBD flavor. In an isolate level, it's not necessarily a organic flavor or I guess a vegetative flavor. It's a little bit more of a bitter flavor, maybe even like a slight metallic flavor. So for broad spectrum, right, we have our CBD and then we have our terpenes. Your terpenes and that combination of terpenes that will be in your CBD, and those terpenes can vary, carry flavor. Some terpenes have a lot stronger flavor than other terpenes. So depending on what that combination is, which should be on your certificate of analysis, will affect that flavor. So when you move into full spectrum, you have your plant matter added to that matrix. And so when you start adding in all of those factors, you potentially can get a stronger flavor, but you definitely get a different flavor. So I guess we're close to the end. So key takeaways. Your consumer is king. You want to really cater to your consumer. your product formulation, your delivery method, your CBD type, your packaging solution should all be made with the consumer in mind. Strategic partners, make or break. So you want to surround yourself with subject matter experts. CBD is new. There's a lot of people that are out there. There's a lot of misinformation that's out there. It's really hard to sort through what the good and the bad is. So you want to focus on quality assurance and safety. Make sure they have documentation that supports what they're telling you. Product consistency. How do they make their product consistent? Ask them. Ask them how they create a product that's consistent batch to batch. Ability to scale. Once you make your product, and if your product is a hit and takes off, you want to make sure that each of your ingredient suppliers has the ability to scale up and continue to meet your demand. All right, and now we're open for questions. I'm going to hand this back to Doug.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michelle, for that presentation. And there's so much information here, and we've got a bunch of questions. So I'm just going to start running through them. So when we're talking about CBD-infused beverages, what are the variables that can impact the shelf life of that product, in terms of the stability of the CBD ingredient within the beverage matrix?
So within your beverage, you're going to have three areas to focus on. So you have your packaging. So the type of packaging that you decide to use for your product will determine your shelf life. So glass is the best. Glass will give you the longest shelf life. When you move into other packaging, you then need to start doing testing, as each formula is very unique, and even down to you have flavors. Your flavors have carriers. Those carriers could affect the stability of your CBD. So with each product that we create, we are doing our own internal testing to see if this is something that falls into an area where it could affect the CBD. And the reality is that CBD is not the only thing in your container that's going to make your shelf life shorter. Depending on what the pHs of your beverage is, your flavors could actually start fading out a lot faster. If you have natural colors, right, your natural colors could start to fade as well. So when you're looking at shelf life, you want to take into consider your packaging. You want to take into consideration your formula and all of the ingredients that are in there. Then you also have to take into consideration your processing. Are you incorporating a processing method that will make your product more stable? Or are you incorporating a processing method that will actually make your beverage and CBD potentially less stable? So all of those things need to work together.
So when we're talking about building more stability into the beverage, obviously the CBD ingredient has a strong factor in there. What are some of the techniques that SORSE uses to make a stable CBD ingredient? Are we using emulsions? The question was specifically related to what is the trick to getting oily CBD to disperse evenly within the beverage matrix?
Okay, yes. So SORSE Tech, we use emulsions. So we have water-based emulsions that we take the CBD and we turn it into an emulsion. So our emulsion has the ability to be homogeneous. So when you're adding it to the beverage, the emulsion will stay homogeneous within the beverage. And because we are taking the CBD and then turning it into emulsion, we also have complete control over our dosing. So our emulsion right now is 3%. So we know it's always going to be 3% when we're making it. We have very tight processing standards that make it so our product is consistent. We also do stability testing. So once you take our emulsion and add it to a beverage, you just easily just pour it in to your formula. You add it exactly like you would a flavor. It actually seamlessly integrates into the product, so you don't have to worry anymore about working with an oil. It doesn't even feel like an oil.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And we have a few questions here related to flavor, and I'm going to dig into these one by one. We have a question specific to using sugars or sweeteners in relation to flavor impact. Have you had any experience in using different sweeteners and how that might help either with masking or altering the flavor composition somehow with the beverage?
Yeah, sugar is a great way to like alter flavor, and it's delicious. So when you think about a product, you should think of it. I kind of think of flavors as like the petals on like a flower, right? And when you're missing a petal, it's like an off note or it's a sharpness. There's something there that kind of like it doesn't quite fit. And so what you need to do is you need to like taste the product and then say like, what's missing? Is it too sour? And if you were to add a little bit of sweetness to it, it would make it round out a little bit better. Is it that maybe you have an off note and it stays in your mouth too long? And so maybe adding sugar and the body that sugar has can actually help kind of mellow that note out. There's lots of tricks that you can use, and sugar is definitely one of them because it imparts body and it also imparts sweetness, and it also has a nice finish. It can definitely be something that can help mellow out your flavors or pull them together or round it out a little bit more. It really depends on what you're working with. There are people that I've seen non-nutritive sweeteners used as potentially like a flavor masker. When you start adding non-nutritive sweeteners to things, you then are starting to get other off notes that you're adding to it. So tasting it and trying lots of things is a lot of times kind of the best way to go. There's not really one answer that fits everything. It's a complex situation, and every time that you add an ingredient, it could unbalance the rest of the ingredients. So it's really going and constantly manipulating the product until you get to something that's rounded out.
Right. Yeah, and the market for CBD beverage is so new. There was some discussion earlier on when you're talking about consumer preferences and what people are looking for in a beverage. Are they looking for a pronounced cannabis flavor, or are they looking for something that's much cleaner? And I think that will depend on where that demographic falls within this emerging market. But have you seen any research, or what's your perspective on the connection between flavor and functionality? Do you think people who get that, slight cannabis note will, have a stronger belief in the efficacy or the functionality of that beverage versus something that's really clean tasting? What are some of the benefits of having a flavor, a notable flavor, and connecting that to functionality?
Yeah, I feel like there's really kind of like two ways that you can target it. Or kind of attack it, I guess. So on one side of it, CBD is a relatively new ingredient. People don't know a lot about it. You can read about it. There's a lot of information out there, right? But the information is kind of conflicting. Some of it doesn't make any sense. Some of it's not true. Some of it is true. But with that comes a little bit of distrust, right, in CBD. And as people are learning more about CBD, they're also learning that there are products that have CBD in it, and CBD is expensive. When you're buying it at the store and you're paying good hard money for this, right? So you want there to be CBD in it, depending on what it is. So because of that trust factor, a lot of people potentially will prefer something that smells and tastes like it has cannabis in it. The other side of that is that if you know a lot about CBD and you trust it, you may decide that you want that synergistic effect and you want those terpenes, and therefore you know that you can taste the terpenes and you don't want them to be hidden. You want them to be there because you know that it's good for you. So that comes back to understanding your consumer. Is your consumer sophisticated when it comes to the CBD market, or is this kind of something that's new for them? If it's new for them and they don't know very much about CBD, I would say maybe starting with an isolate and getting them practiced in CBD, getting them familiar with it, showing them that you can have CBD and letting them just kind of enjoy the experience. As they become more sophisticated, they may start looking for other options that are a little more intense. And in that case, you have like your full spectrum that you can move to. So it comes down to where your consumer is on kind of their CBD journey. If they're just starting out, they may want it to taste like weed, so they know that it's there. They may decide they don't want it to taste like that at all because they don't like that perception. So it comes down to understanding your consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and along those lines, do you see a good long-term future for use of broad spectrum CBD in beverages versus isolates for that purpose? Getting a larger frame of the entourage effect and so forth.
Yeah, so one of the trends that we're really seeing right now is people making lifestyle choices. Like people don't really diet anymore, right? They make lifestyle choices and they just try to be healthier day to day. So there's so much information that's available online. There's a lot more people that know about food ingredients, food processing, what's good for you and what's bad for you than ever before. So knowing that, a lot of consumers are making the choice to, instead of going low sodium or low fat or sugar-free, they are choosing, right, the ingredients that they want to incorporate into their body. So they're no longer avoiding ingredients. They're very specifically picking the ingredients they want. So with that, right, CBD falls into that world. It falls into kind of this like healthy lifestyle. And as people learn more about it, I think that they're going to move to more of a full spectrum as they're trying to incorporate it into their life. And when it comes to a beverage, it's so easy to incorporate it into your life that I feel like the transition from a new CBD consumer to a more sophisticated consumer is probably a very quick trajectory.
All right, very good. We have a question specific to the stability and of the CBD emulsion that SORSE technology offers. Will this CBD emulsion stay stable throughout the course of a typical beverage shelf life? And are there any differences compared to maybe some other fortified beverages on the market? Does it have an acceptable length of shelf life?
So shelf life is really dependent on the product and how you want the product to be represented throughout the lifespan of your product, right? So the CBD, depending on your packaging, right, there could be some shelf life there that you need to take into consideration. If you're to take our CBD and like put it in glass and put it in a dark space, like the shelf life could be indefinite. So there's a lot of factors that go into shelf life, and a lot of it has to do with the other ingredients that are in that packaging and how they interact. So as a consumer, if you decided I want to get rid of all the rest of the ingredients and I'm just going to sell CBD, that would be really easy to make stable over a long period of time. But as soon as you start adding things to it, you now need to take into consideration all of the ingredients and sub-ingredients that are in those ingredients and how they interact with CBD. And it can be very different product to product. And then at the same time, if you want your product to have as long as possible shelf life, you have to manufacture and develop your product for that. If that's the most important thing for you, then you need to say, I need to not have any natural ingredients that are going to fade out in that time. I probably don't want to have any real fruit juices that potentially could turn brown. And my product needs to have a 1-year shelf life and it needs to have CBD in it. So then you would start picking those other ingredients and saying, okay, what other ingredients do I know are stable for a year, and then start building your product that way.
Right. Yeah, that's why it's always good to make sure you have all of your product goals established at the beginning of the project versus later on, so that you can design accordingly. Well, that's about all the time we have. Michelle, any closing question, any closing statement that you'd like to include?
Well, I want to remind everybody that SORSE Technology offers the service of helping people develop their product, formulate their product, and the ability to assist them through the commercialization process. So we've been around for a while now. We have a lot of connections, and we've been working with a lot of manufacturers to make sure that there's manufacturers out there that work with CBD and are familiar with our product to make it easier for consumers to get their products to market.
All right, very good. Well, that's all the time that we have today. Please join me in thanking Michelle Sundquist for her presentation, as well as our sponsor, SORSE Technology. If you have additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on the console. And you can visit preparedfoods.com/webinars for an archive of this presentation, as well as information about other upcoming events. We sincerely appreciate your time and hope that you have found this webinar to be a valuable experience. Good afternoon.